At the party, a seemingly ordinary man dressed in a three-piece suit sat quietly on the outskirts, scrolling through his tablet. This event was a wedding rehearsal dinner dance for two couples, Gary Harris and Belinda Cummings, and Jason Witten and Melissa Foster. Gary, who was tall with wavy blonde hair and striking blue eyes, mingled with the guests. Belinda, shorter with curly brown hair and a distinct figure, stood out alongside Melissa, whose long blonde hair complemented her petite frame. Gary and Jason had been friends since elementary school, while Belinda and Melissa had bonded during their college years. Gary made his way through the crowd, introducing himself to unfamiliar faces, until he noticed a man alone with a clipboard. With a friendly smile, he approached and extended his hand. "Hey, I'm Gary Harris, one of the groomsmen," he introduced himself. "I'm Preston Fulton, but everyone calls me Press," the man replied, shaking Gary's hand. "Which bride or groom are you here for?" Gary asked with a wider smile. "Actually, I'm here for you and for Jason," Press said. "But I need to talk to you first, and then, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to talk to both you and Jason together." Gary felt a bit uneasy about this request. "You have an advantage over me," he said. "What exactly do you need to talk to me about, and for that matter, what do you need to talk to Jason and me about?" Press pulled an envelope from his pocket. "I think this letter will explain most of my intentions. If, after reading it, you don't want to hear any more, then I'll talk to Jason alone." Gary opened the envelope and began to read. He was stunned to see it was from his father, and the contents shook him to his core. "Dear son, it pains me deeply that I have to send Mr. Fulton to deliver this message. To be blunt, Belinda cheated on you, and Mr. Fulton has proof. After you see the evidence, I ask you to take Mr. Fulton's advice. I have engaged the firm he works for because they offer much more than just proof of your future wife's infidelity. Please listen carefully to Mr. Fulton and take his word for it. Your mom and I love you, and I am truly sorry you were betrayed in such an insulting way. If you need someone to talk to after this sad affair is over, I will always be there for you. Love." Dad. Gary read the letter repeatedly, unable to believe what it said. He adored Belinda wholeheartedly, seeing her as his perfect match. She possessed all the qualities he cherished: beauty, intelligence, wit, and affection. How could she betray him? Despite questioning his father's accuracy and considering the letter might be forged, Gary couldn't shake the confusion over the accusation against his future wife. "I don't believe my father," Gary said, growing angrier. "If it were true, he would have told me himself." "Let me introduce myself," Press said, handing Gary a business card. It read Me Incorporated, with Preston Fulton, field representative at the bottom. Gary was confused and suspicious. "What is Me Inc.?" he asked. "It stands for Male Equality," Press explained. "What's this about?" Gary was now furious. "Our organization aims to restore gender equality, countering the effects of groups like Now," Press said calmly. "They've influenced attitudes, potentially impacting your fiancé's actions." "That's absurd," Gary objected. "What does it have to do with Belinda cheating on me?" "Directly nothing, but it addresses the societal context influencing her behavior," Press replied. "For instance, many elementary teachers, predominantly women, consistently give boys lower grades, perpetuating negative perceptions of masculinity. This societal trend impacts generations, leading to dependency and underrepresentation in higher education and academia. Me Incorporated aims to reverse this cycle." Gary felt his composure slipping. Moments ago, he was elated. Now he simmered with frustration. He needed to confirm Belinda's infidelity. "Fine, but where's the proof?" Press placed a reassuring hand on Gary's arm. "Before I reveal the evidence, heed your father's advice. Listen closely to what I offer and follow my guidance. Once you see the tapes, you'll likely want to confront your fiancé immediately, but acting impulsively will undermine your chance for true vengeance. This isn't merely about retaliation, it's about sending a clear message. Can I trust you to stay composed?" Gary's heart raced, his palms sweaty. After a moment, he nodded. "Whether you confront her tonight or not, I still need to speak with you and Jason. It won't change the current situation, but it will safeguard your future." Gary affirmed with another nod. Mr. Fulton nodded in satisfaction as he tapped the launch button on the screen and handed the tablet to Gary. Within moments, Gary watched Belinda cozying up to unfamiliar men. Although the absence of timestamps initially eased Gary's concerns, His mood shifted when a video depicted Belinda with an ex-boyfriend just days after they agreed to exclusivity for New Year's Eve, contradicting their arrangement. Subsequent videos spanning their 6-month engagement revealed Belinda's involvement with multiple men, including some of Gary's friends. The final video nearly drove Gary to erupt at the rehearsal party. It depicted Belinda and Gary's best man, Spencer Tolliver, engaging in carnal activities in Gary's apartment. The accompanying dialogue, wherein Belinda expressed intent to continue their liaison post-marriage, fueled Gary's fury. Though he fought the urge to react impulsively, the betrayal gnawed at him. Press observed Gary's distressed expression and retrieved a bottle from his pocket, offering it to alleviate Gary's discomfort. "Feeling any better?" inquired Mr. Fulton. "Your reaction is common when caught off guard. I'll explain shortly how we'll address this, but take solace in discovering Belinda's betrayal now rather than years later, potentially with children involved." Once Gary composed himself, Press urged him to fetch Jason. Gary needed to disclose Belinda's infidelity to his friend before tomorrow's ceremony. Though Jason wasn't facing the same dilemma, it was crucial for both their futures to hear Press's advice. After a few minutes, Gary managed to pull Jason aside from the groom, insisting it was urgent. Gary whispered in Jason's ear as they exited. Initially skeptical, Jason hesitated until Gary provided more context about Belinda's deceit. At first, Jason, like Gary, doubted the news. However, instead of showing Jason the video, Mr. Fulton presented 3 incriminating photographs of Belinda's infidelity. Once seated, Press recorded their conversation on a clipboard and elaborated on his organization's mission. He planned to review his presentation for improvement and send a copy to headquarters for evaluation. Me Incorporated continually sought growth, member protection, and effective information dissemination. Press expressed his sympathy for Belinda's actions, providing Gary with a packet detailing his responsibilities for the ceremony. He then gave each young man a book outlining Me Incorporated, its mission, challenges, and recommendations for married life. The book reinforced Press's advice and highlighted that their fathers had secured lifetime memberships for them. After ensuring Gary remained composed, Press nodded approvingly as Gary informed Belinda he was heading to his parents' house due to stomach issues, a pre-arranged excuse to adhere to a wedding tradition. Gary bid Belinda farewell with a simple peck on the cheek, and she continued to enjoy the festivities, albeit with some confusion over her behavior tolerated due to the impending wedding. Exiting the check room with his coat, Press prepared to leave with upcoming commitments, including overseeing Gary's wedding tomorrow and a subsequent meeting. He looked forward to returning home to his family. Wrapped in his scarf and winter coat, Press stepped into the frigid Ohio night, where snowflakes swirled in the overcast sky, hinting at a looming blizzard. He longed for the warmth of sunny South Florida. Driving on Interstate 20 toward East Cleveland, Press easily located the main campus of the vast Cleveland Clinic. Despite the usual parking challenges, the nearly empty lot facilitated a quick spot. After navigating the building and checking in, Press searched for his next task. Much of the groundwork was completed, but some on-site tasks remained. Spotting Ben Sharpen in the cafeteria, Press approached. Despite being 49, Ben appeared much older, his weary appearance suggesting a life devoid of joy. "I'm Preston Fulton," Press introduced himself. "You can call me Press. I work for Me Incorporated, aiming to assist people like you." The man rose and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, but nothing about my ex-wife Connie would surprise me, and frankly, I doubt you can help," he said. "I couldn't care less about Connie's actions or my kids. I believe I have information that may interest you, but first, can you tell me about your marriage and divorce?" Press prompted. "Not much to tell," Ben shrugged. "We married young, and it went downhill fast. Connie's jobs caused problems, especially after she got pregnant. I considered divorce many times, but ended up enduring it for the kids. Eventually, I caught her cheating and filed for divorce, but got a raw deal in court." Ben shook his head, taking a sip of coffee. 12 years of marriage wasted," he sighed. "Caught her with a UPS man in our bed. Should have hired a better lawyer." "Tell me about the final divorce decree," Press inquired. "After I became head of the X-ray department and started earning decently, the judge left me with barely what I initially earned. Connie got the house, and I'm stuck paying the bills while she enjoys herself with her lovers, thanks to alimony and child support. Lawyers say I'm powerless. Ben explained bitterly. This is one of the worst injustices I've seen. Press sympathized. We need to take action. I appreciate it, but I've only got 2 more alimony payments left, and I'm done with those kids, Ben replied, his resentment evident. Connie's poisoned them against me since day one. Right now I'm helpless, but I'm grateful you're on my side. Press opened his briefcase saying, There's more you need to know that could change things significantly. What's that? Ben asked, intrigued. To start, Mr. Sharpen, none of these 3 children are yours, Press declared, placing DNA tests on the table. That deceitful woman, Ben exclaimed, slamming his fist on the table, drawing attention in the cafeteria. However, the din resumed after a moment. Press noticed Ben's demeanor shift, his voice subdued. It's not much relief, considering I'm almost finished with alimony. At least I won't feel guilty hating those kids. No, your relief is just beginning, Press reassured with a smile. Let me explain. We've identified the real fathers of all 3 children. They are successful married men, and we're suing them to reclaim the child support you paid, totaling tens of thousands. Their wives will learn of their infidelity, possibly leading to divorces. Ben sat in disbelief. Is this real? Absolutely, and there's more to come. We'll correct any injustices, Press assured. Why help me? Ben questioned, concern evident. I can't afford it. Don't worry, Ben. This is pro bono. Our company is dedicated to equal rights for men and women, Press clarified. I had no idea such an organization existed, Ben remarked. But how do you finance your operations? We use interest from our capital fund, Press explained. We're continually attracting new members who pay initiation and annual fees. Lifetime membership is also available. All funds raised go into our capital fund, which currently nears $2 billion. Additionally, we receive support from benefactors for lobbying and our endowment. But I haven't paid anything, and I can't afford to, Ben objected. Relax, Ben. Your case is pro bono. Me Incorporated covers all expenses, Press assured him. I don't know how to thank you, Ben said gratefully. No need to thank us yet. Let me explain further, Press continued. Your ex-wife has been deceiving the court. She has illegal income from medication sales, even during your marriage. We've traced and seized her funds. Tomorrow, she'll discover her money's gone, but that's just the beginning. Police will search your old house, where she's now caught with enough medication to be considered a major supplier. We also suspect her involvement in a teenager's passing from her medications, likely resulting in a 15-year sentence. Her children and past lovers will face charges too, ensuring she spends years behind bars. Ben's eyes widened as he processed the information. Now here's the most important part, Press continued. The brokerage house and law firm employing the individuals involved in your wife's pregnancy are being sued for exploiting you both. We anticipate substantial 7-figure settlements for each of you. If you choose, you can use this money to purchase a lifetime membership in Me Incorporated, though it's not mandatory for your pro bono case. A grin spread across Ben's face. I'm not sure if any of this will happen, but just thinking about it lifts my spirits. And if the money does come through as you say, I'll definitely invest in a lifetime membership. After signing a few papers, Ben returned to his room for a restful night before the wedding. The following day, the previous day's blizzard had cleared, leaving a bright, sunny day. Press anticipated the bride's satisfaction with the weather, although the temperature remained at about 20 degrees. The lack of wind made the cold tolerable. With the wedding set for 1:30 p.m., Press leisurely perused the paper for an hour, observing media bias, a skill honed during his training. By 12:45 p.m., he settled into the back row of the church on the groom's side, ready for the ceremony. Once seated, Press scanned the room for the videographer. Not spotting them, he stood up to search. If the designated videographer was absent, Press would resort to using his handheld camera, though he preferred not to due to the expected lower quality. Eventually, he found the videographer in the balcony, in an ideal shooting spot. Satisfied, Press returned to his seat. At precisely 1:30, the organist halted their random pieces and commenced the wedding march. Gary, the best man, and the groom's friends had already gathered at one side of the altar. The bride, escorted by her father, slowly proceeded down the aisle. About 10 minutes before the service, the 2 white screens were lowered to face the congregation. As the bride and groom reached the altar, the priest began the ceremony, asking Gary Lewis Harris if he would take Belinda Marie Cummings as his lawful wife, to cherish and hold in sickness and health, in wealth and poverty, forsaking all others until death do them part. Gary remained silent for several tense moments, his gaze fixed on Belinda. Murmurs rippled through the assembled guests due to the delay in his response. Then, turning to the congregation, Gary's voice rang out, rejecting Belinda as his wife. With a press of a button, footage of Belinda's infidelity flooded the screens, sparking chaos. Belinda and her mother shrieked, while some guests hastily exited the church. Press observed Spencer's pet expression just as Gary advanced towards him. "Gary, it's me, your best man," Spencer whispered, cut off by Gary's punch landing on his nose. The sound of breaking bone echoed through the church as Spencer staggered backward, blood streaming. The priest and parts of Belinda's dress were also stained. Belinda collapsed into hysterical sobs, her mother trying to console her. Meanwhile, Belinda's father, his face crimson with rage, disowned her on the spot. Amidst the chaos, Gary's friends save Jason hesitated, unsure of their next move. Jason stepped forward, his hand raised. "That thing on the ground is garbage," he declared menacingly. "If you stand by it, you're no friend of ours." The groomsmen, glancing at Jason and the damning footage, shook their heads in agreement. "I want nothing to do with that idiot," one of them muttered. Jason then assisted the fallen Spencer to his feet. "Listen up, Spencer," Jason's voice boomed with disdain. "You're a lowlife, and everyone here knows it now. We've been friends forever, and this is how you repay Gary. Not only were you supposed to be his best man, but you're also an Ada. How do you think your boss will react when he sees this on his desk Monday? And the bar association? You're in for a world of trouble, so do everyone a favor and get out of here. And don't bother keeping our numbers." Spencer slinked away from Jason and vanished through a door at the church's rear. Meanwhile, Gary retrieved the package Mr. Fulton had given him the previous night and stashed it behind a column near the altar. From it, he produced photos of Belinda with other men and distributed them. First, the groomsmen received them, then Belinda and her mother. "Here are some mementos for you," Gary remarked, dropping a stack into Belinda's lap. She looked up at him, anguish in her eyes. "I'm so sorry, Gary." "I love you," she pleaded. Gary shook his head, a sardonic grin on his face. "Let me get this straight. You show your love by fooling around with Spencer? You truly are promiscuous, Belinda. You need help, but thankfully that's not my problem. Best of luck with your miserable life." "Please, Gary, give me another chance," she pleaded as he walked away. Gary shot back over his shoulder. No chance. He strode down the aisle, scattering photos onto the pews. His father caught up, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Let's go, Gary. The reception is still on. We might as well grab a bite." Gary glanced at his father's resigned smile. "Hold on, Dad. There's someone else who needs to see these pictures." Gary approached the sturdy, gray-haired man, Belinda's boss at the renowned financial firm where she'd been employed for 2 years. "Mr. Turner, I'm Gary Harris," Gary addressed him. "We met at your company's Christmas party." "Yes, Gary, I remember," Mr. Turner replied, rising and assisting his wife to her feet. "I'm truly sorry about what happened." Gary extended half a dozen snapshots. "I'd like you to have these pictures." "No need, Gary," Mr. Turner responded. "I've seen enough." "These aren't for you," Gary clarified, offering them to Mrs. Sterner. "They're for you, Mr. Sterner. Pictures of you and Belinda. You had her sprawled across your desk, making a mockery of her. I hope you cherish these pictures as much as your husband and Belinda cherished that moment." Turning to his father, Gary declared, "I'm ready to go, Dad." Press, recording the exchange, smiled. After confirming details with the videographer, Press returned to his room. He needed to draft his report and review the videotape of his conversation with Gary and Jason, ensuring everything was included. Press went over his report twice. He then reviewed the conversation with Gary and Jason, marking each point on his checklist. He began by outlining Me Incorporated. Its mission to ensure equal treatment for men under the law and support members facing infidelity. Attendees learned that divorce laws often favor women, granting them primary custody and alimony, even if both parents are equally capable. Me Incorporated advocated for fair alimony limits, emphasizing the importance of women re-entering the workforce. They also proposed shared custody arrangements where parents alternate residences every 2 weeks, providing more time with children. Press stressed the need for contraception, warning men to distrust claims of birth control use, as unplanned pregnancies could result from unprotected lovemaking. The feminist movement instilled the idea that women had sole control over pregnancy decisions, disadvantaging men. While Me Incorporated supported women's right to choose abortion, they objected to women avoiding financial responsibility after choosing to keep a child despite a man's objections. The woman could decide on abortion, but if she chose to keep the child, the man had no legal say yet was often obligated to pay child support, which Me Incorporated deemed unjust. The ringing phone startled Press, who seldom received calls while in the field. He typically checked in with his wife nightly, so an unexpected call from her suggested urgency. Occasionally, the office reached out, but this interruption concerned him. Pausing his tablet, Press answered the phone. "Hey, Turner, something's come up," said Press's boss, James Baker. "I'm sorry, but you'll need to stay an extra day." "What's going on?" Press inquired. "We have another project in a con tomorrow, and the on-site representative is sick. You just need to be there for the taping. Make sure you film everything, not just audio. The bonus for the extra day is approved and will be in your next paycheck." "No worries. My camera's charging, and I'm always up for extra cash," Press grinned. "But you know me. I'm committed to what we do. Your dedication is appreciated. I'll email you the details. Your flight's rescheduled to avoid the snowstorm. Sorry for pulling you away from your family. Hope you get out before the storm. They're predicting 15 to 20 inches of snow." After the call, Press waited for the email. The case involved a wife aspiring to be a movie star married to a successful screenwriter. Despite wanting to stay, he had other obligations. Over their 5-year marriage, she had affairs with industry insiders, hoping to boost her career. Currently involved with Hollywood star Kirk Southern, she secured roles in his upcoming films. Press ensured all logistics were covered, going above his role's demands. The project was meticulously planned and executed. He then checked his email for the updated flight details. Turning his focus back to the video, Press found men's reactions to Me Incorporated. Presentations intriguing, particularly Gary and Jason's. But the topic that garnered the most response was DNA testing. Me Incorporated lobbied for mandatory DNA tests for newborns in every state. This measure aimed to establish paternity immediately, aiding in identifying potential health issues. Currently, men face challenges proving paternity within a short time frame, leaving them financially responsible for children who weren't theirs. The proposed law would allow men to cease payments for non-biological children at any time. Press diligently noted each discussed point as he watched the presentation on his tablet. He paused the video at a specific section he hadn't considered in his previous marriage: his wife's refusal of lovemaking. While financial disputes remained the top cause of marital discord, issues surrounding intimacy had risen to prominence. Laws had evolved, prohibiting husbands from coercing their wives into intimacy, a change Press supported. However, he pondered the purpose of marriage if a spouse could deny closeness without reason. Me Incorporated proposed a solution: prenuptial agreements. They advised all men, regardless of wealth, to sign one. Beyond property division, these agreements addressed infidelity, favoring the faithful spouse with a 70-30 split in case of cheating. They also mandated a weekly intimacy schedule, ensuring no partner faced rejection. Violating these terms warranted an 80-20 divorce settlement, with the refusing spouse receiving only 20% of the property. Despite some reservations about Me Incorporated, its philosophy, Press wholeheartedly supported the organization. He had first-hand experience with their pro bono assistance when his cheating ex-wife threatened him. Press acknowledged that without their help, his life with Ben would have been even more challenging. The following day, Press rose early for a significant appointment. Over breakfast, he was tasked with meeting Janet Arnold, a rare occurrence involving a woman. Me Incorporated was well prepared for such situations. Spotting Janet in a back booth, Press observed her with her 2 children, coloring placemats to pass the time. The kids, around 7 and 5, seemed content but occasionally checked on their mother. Janet, with disheveled, dirty blonde hair and no makeup, appeared weary despite her pregnancy. Press found solace in knowing he could alleviate some of her burden. Initially, when Press encountered cases like this, it surprised him, leading him to question why he was aiding a woman. He believed Me Incorporated. His role was to assist men. However, Mr. Wagner, a senior vice president, clarified that Me Incorporated aimed for true gender equality, not one-sided advocacy. While their primary focus was aiding men, they would assist women if a member was cheating on their spouse. Over time, Press grew to appreciate Me Incorporated more. Unlike seeking a return to outdated gender dynamics, Me Incorporated aimed for fair laws without bias. The organization sought to uphold marriage's sanctity and deter infidelity by imposing severe consequences on cheaters. They believed harsh penalties for infidelity could dissuade individuals from engaging in affairs. Mrs. Arnold, thank you for meeting me, Press said, settling into the booth across from her. I hope you don't mind, Mr. Fulton, she asked nervously, glancing at her children, but my mother couldn't watch the kids. Not a problem, he assured with a smile. Turning to the kids, he asked, Hungry? They've got fantastic pancakes here, loaded with whipped cream and sprinkles. At the mention of food, both kids perked up, tugging at Press's heartstrings. You don't have to, Janet protested. You found my husband's account and how I can access the money. Since Thad left, we've been tight on cash. Just tell me, and we'll be on our way. Nonsense, Press insisted, signaling to the waitress. I have plenty to discuss with you. Let's order breakfast, and I'll fill you in on everything you need to know. Though hesitant, Janet relented, swayed by her children's hopeful looks. Press ordered pancakes with whipped cream and sprinkles for the kids, along with bacon, hash browns, and chocolate milk. Janet opted for scrambled eggs, toast, and coffee, while Press chose a Western omelet. After drinks were served, Janet introduced her children, Michael and Terry, aged 7 and 5. Janet explained simply that her husband Simon had left with his secretary Tammy, leaving behind debts and no financial support. Simon had vanished, leaving Janet clueless about his whereabouts. As the children focused on their pancakes, Press broached the topic. I assume you knew about your husband's previous marriage? Janet nodded. He claimed she was manipulative and planted evidence against him. Exactly, Press affirmed, producing a folder from his briefcase. His first wife, Mary, not only drained his accounts but also framed him for pill possession. We stepped in to prevent a prison sentence. I'm confused, Janet admitted, putting down her fork. Who exactly do you represent, and how did you assist Simon? Think of us like an insurance company, Press explained. Your husband essentially purchased a policy to safeguard himself from betrayal. As it turned out, Mary wasn't as clever as she thought. Her fingerprints were found on one of the pill bags, and her supplier implicated her, leading to her arrest. Furthermore, we traced and recovered Simon's transferred funds. Janet seemed satisfied with this explanation and resumed eating. When I initially contacted you, Press continued, opening the folder, I had just begun my investigation. Normally, I wouldn't have reached out so soon, but I understood your urgent need for financial assistance. Since our last conversation, I've uncovered more of your husband's assets. Did you know about this? Janet shook her head. Thad handled the finances. I focused on the kids and the house. So far, I've identified about $2 million in liquid assets he took, Press disclosed. Additionally, he holds silent partnership interests in 3 businesses, generating around $100,000 annually. Mrs. Arnold, there's strong evidence suggesting you're entitled to half of these partnerships. Janet sat, her mouth agape. After a brief pause, she leaned in, eyes filled with sorrow. That may be true, but I can't afford to fight my husband. I don't even have money for a divorce lawyer. Mrs. Arnold, don't worry, Press reassured, patting her hand. We've arranged a top-notch attorney for you. He'll contact you soon. Your husband will foot the legal bills as per court order. Also, we've located him in Costa Rica with his girlfriend. His assets are frozen except for what's allotted for your living expenses. Tears welled in Janet's eyes as she trembled. This isn't some cruel joke, is it? I assure you, it's all true, Press affirmed, handing her an envelope with supporting documents. Before you leave, I'll help you access the first account privately. Follow me to that empty table where we can talk without disturbing your children. Janet gave Press a quizzical look before directing the kids to behave and relocating to a nearby table. The children remained engrossed in their meal. Once settled, Press broached the sensitive topic. Your husband's not exactly honorable, but you probably knew that. He's crossed a line, and our policies outline the consequences if he breaks the rules. Rule number 1, no cheating. Confusion clouded Janet's face. Consequences? What kind? Well, most of his remaining wealth after you get your share will go toward Fines to Me Incorporated. He won't go bankrupt, but his lifestyle will plummet, Press explained. Prison? Janet exclaimed, louder than she meant. Why? Tax evasion and currency violations. He might serve at least 6 months. And in case you're wondering, his secretary Tammy is stuck in Costa Rica with nothing. She won't find it easy to return without her passport, which Thad stashed away. Janet's face lit up with a grin, followed by hearty laughter. After she signed a stack of legal papers, Press stood up. Well, I've got to go. But before putting on his winter coat, he pulled out an envelope from his pocket. Here's $500. Get some winter gear for you and the kids, then enjoy yourselves. After saying goodbye to the children, Janet planted a kiss on his cheek. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but I'm truly grateful, Janet said. Press settled the bill as he left and headed for a con, where another project awaited him. The next day, he gathered in a conference room at the offices of Moreland, Connor, and Stiles. These lawyers represented Beverly Bracken in her divorce case. Gloria Connor led the legal proceedings and negotiation. Known for their aggressive tactics in divorce cases, this firm rarely faced defeat. However, today was an exception, their most devastating loss yet. Paul Bracken had Elliot Chalmers as his representation, a nondescript middle-aged man who looked more like a British civil servant than a lawyer. Paul, Elliot, and Press sat on one side of the table, with Paul between the other 2 men. On the opposite side sat Mrs. Bracken, Gloria Connor, 4 paralegals, a court stenographer, and a secretary finalizing notarized documents. Both Paul and Beverly had black hair and charming demeanors. Paul was undeniably handsome, regaling Press and Elliot with tales from his time in Hollywood. Beverly, on the other hand, exuded striking beauty with her blonde hair, blue eyes, and flawless figure. Yet beneath her allure lurked a sense of insincerity, particularly evident in her smile, which never quite reached her eyes. Nonetheless, Beverly's beauty was undeniable, explaining Paul's attraction to her. Before we start, Press announced, standing and placing his camera bag on the table, I'd like to set up my camera to document this meeting. That's not possible, Gloria interjected, waving her hand dismissively. Filming isn't allowed here unless it's for a court deposition, so I'm sorry, but you'll need to put the camera away. Press looked at Elliot, prompting an immediate response. If we can't film, then we're leaving, and the deal we made is off. We'll have to renegotiate from scratch. You can't do that, Beverly interjected anxiously. Just then, Kirk Southern peeked into the room, nodding to everyone before fixing his gaze on Beverly. Just letting you know I'm here, he said before disappearing. Press observed the occupants, noticing even Gloria wore a dreamy expression. Chuckling to himself, he caught Beverly's pleading look, prompting a begrudging nod from Gloria. Fine, Mr. Fulton. You can set up your camera, Gloria conceded, her irritation evident. Consider it an exception. Once the camera was set up and running, they discussed the divorce details. The house was to be sold, with proceeds split evenly, but Press knew the market offered little equity. Similarly, the money was to be divided equally, though there wasn't much, as Paul primarily focused on writing, living off royalties from his last TV series. Regarding those royalties, Paul offered them to Beverly instead of alimony. Beverly, just to clarify, Paul interjected, addressing Gloria, you'll receive royalties from the Gobbler Twins TV series. Since I'm granting you full rights to it, you waive any claim to my stamp or comic book collection. Additionally, you relinquish any rights to past or future works of mine. I couldn't care less about your comic books, Beverly dismissed. I have everything I need. One remaining item concerned child support for Sarah Bracken, almost a year old. Gloria objected to the language, which stipulated that Paul would provide $1,500 a month to support any offspring he and Beverly had. I prefer Sarah to be specifically named, Gloria insisted. Listen, Paul snapped angrily. I want nothing more to do with that woman who will soon be my ex-wife. She's promiscuous and will sleep with anyone. I'm sure of it because Beverly had physical encounters with me right before serving the divorce papers. Who knows, she might even be pregnant right now. I won't revisit this. The agreement remains unless you wish to renegotiate. Mr. Bracken, I won't tolerate such language, Gloria retorted, her face flushing with anger. Furthermore, I believe the wording in this agreement needs amending. I'll accept the wording as it stands, Beverly interjected promptly. Despite Gloria's attempts to dissuade her, Beverly seemed determined to finalize the divorce. They concluded with the last item, and both Paul and Beverly signed the document. The witnesses followed suit, and then the notary stamped it. Copies were distributed to Beverly, Paul, and each attorney. All sorted? Paul asked, with nods all around. He rose and declared, "Thank heavens it's over, and I'm no longer married to that dreadful woman." Beverly and Gloria winced, prompting Gloria to intervene. "I've made it clear I won't tolerate such language. I suggest you leave before security escorts you out." Before Paul could respond, the door opened, and Kirk entered. Beverly greeted him with a kiss on the cheek and a hug. To the surprise of most, Kirk extended his hand to Paul. "Hey Paul, how have you been?" I'm doing great, Kirk," Paul replied, shaking his hand. "I'm no longer married to that unfaithful woman." "I'd heard rumors about her Hollywood reputation, but I didn't believe them," Kirk remarked, taking Beverly's hand. "Looks like you were right, though. Still, I won the bet." "Yes, you did," Paul chuckled. "But it was worth it." "What bet?" Beverly asked, bewildered. "Do you two know each other?" Kirk smiled. "Paul and I go way back, since college." "What was the bet?" Paul and Kirk shared a laugh. Now Gloria and her assistants were puzzled. "Well, Beverly," Paul smirked, "I bet Kirk that he couldn't win over my faithful, loving wife. I lost." "But Kirk, you said you loved me," Beverly interjected, tears welling. "You promised to marry me once I was divorced." "Beverly, when you married Paul, you vowed to leave all others behind," Kirk said, shaking his head. "When I found out about the other men you were involved with after the wedding, that was the end of it." Beverly dissolved into sobs, and it took Gloria 5 minutes to console her. Once Beverly regained some composure, Paul sat beside her and squeezed her hand. "Beverly, I may be slow, but I genuinely believed you loved me," he admitted. "But when I found out the truth a year later, I was furious. I wanted an immediate divorce. Then I thought of Sarah and realized I needed to wait. But when the DNA test revealed she wasn't mine, I knew you needed to learn a lesson." Beverly paled at the mention of the DNA test. "That's why you insisted on that provision," Gloria muttered angrily. "You set us up. This whole ordeal was a sham. It was designed to deceive my client. I demand the entire divorce petition be invalidated." "You need more than luck, counselor," Elliot remarked with a strange smile. "My client had no intention of deceiving anyone. According to your client, she got exactly what she wanted. If there's any deception here, it's your client trying to pass off her child as Mr. Bracken's. If you think you have a case, give it your best shot. As far as I'm concerned, the evidence in this room speaks volumes." The room fell silent, broken only by Beverly's sobs. Then Paul addressed her directly. "Beverly, look at me." His ex-wife raised her eyes. Paul sighed deeply. "I'll be straight with you. I thought humiliating you would bring me satisfaction, but it didn't. I loved you wholeheartedly, even after learning of your betrayal. Part of me still cared for you. Kirk was spot on about your reputation. Every producer and director knew you'd do anything for a role. I guess I was the only one oblivious to your true character." Beverly struggled to catch her breath, her chest heaving noticeably with each inhale. Press observed this, realizing Paul still had feelings for her. "Remember when you got the role in the Gobbler Twins?" he asked. Beverly nodded. "I thought my hard work had paid off, but you hadn't helped me at all," she replied. "You're mistaken," Paul denied. "While I encouraged you to succeed on your own, I secretly pulled strings to secure that role for you." "You're lying," Beverly countered. "I earned that role. I wanted you to believe that, but the truth is I had to make sacrifices for it. I gave up a portion of my future royalties, which will stop in about 2.5 years, Paul admitted. Beverly's expression betrayed her disbelief. Gloria realized her error, never having investigated the status of the royalties. Her humiliation was eclipsed by Beverly's realization. Beverly, proud of her achievement, now grasped its origins in her husband's sacrifice, prompting more tears. "I won't abandon Sarah," Paul assured gently. Though not my biological daughter, I care for her deeply. I've set up a trust fund for her with $200,000, increasing to $500,000. The interest will cover Sarah's expenses with audits on submitted bills. When she's 25, the trust will be hers. As for you, stick with the serial royalties. You'll need them. Beverly, let's be honest. Your acting skills aren't top-notch. Given your reputation, you might land minor roles until your looks fade. If you're okay with trading favors for roles, go ahead, Paul remarked, igniting a flash of animosity on Beverly's face. Despite her anger, she turned to Kirk for comfort, remaining silent. Paul sighed sadly. In all these years, Beverly, I doubt you've cared for anyone but yourself. Someday you'll find love, and I hope it treats you better than I did, he said, glancing at Kirk before continuing. But today might bring you that pain, and if so, I sympathize. He rose slowly. This is our last talk, Beverly. Reach out through Elliot if you need me. Take care of Sarah or face the consequences. After farewells, they left together. Beverly sobbed into her arms, and Press quickly packed up, heading to the airport before the impending snowstorm closed it. A year later, Preston Turner settled into the chair opposite his boss, James Baker, for the annual review. Press knew all his cases underwent periodic reviews upon filing, but during the yearly assessment, his boss scrutinized cases Press believed should have been resolved today. Press aimed to conclude 3 Cleveland cases and 1 from Macon. After perusing Press's laudable annual review, the two men delved into evaluating the cases to ascertain their closure. Review this project with Gary and Jason. Explain why you recommend shutting them down, Mr. Baker instructed, summoning the president. Gary Harris and Jason Witten, Press referred to his folder. In case you've forgotten, the two were set to marry shortly, but we uncovered Gary's fiancée as a serial cheater. Gary publicly humiliated Belinda at a church service before walking out. Yes, I recall that video, Mr. Baker nodded. I almost felt sorry for her. Seems she truly cared for Gary. But how's she holding up after her infidelity came to light? Belinda left Cleveland. She eventually landed in Las Vegas, where she works as a waitress and part-time dealer. She maintains contact with her mother, but her father refuses to communicate with her post-marriage failure. Belinda continues dating multiple men. Interestingly, she still holds on to memories of Gary, occasionally writing to him. Surprisingly, Gary seems to have forgiven her, responding to her letters at times. However, any chance of reconciliation is out of the question. Gary is now in a serious relationship with Linda Kerr and reportedly plans to propose within the next 2 months. According to my sources. What about the best man's treatment? Actually, we didn't need to intervene. The district attorney terminated him, and the Bar Association revoked his license for 5 years. He lost all his friends and left town shortly after the wedding debacle. Belinda's boss, his spouse, took him to the cleaners in their divorce. While he's not destitute, he's forfeited half his assets, and his 3 children no longer speak to him. And Jason Witten? He tied the knot with Melissa, and they seemed genuinely content. Moreover, Melissa willingly signed a prenuptial agreement, and they're eagerly awaiting their first child any day now. Mr. Baker grinned. I agree with closing both these cases. Now, what's the update on the Ben Sharpen case? As anticipated, Ben successfully sued and recouped the child support payments he made for their children from their biological fathers. Yet, Ben achieved more than mere reimbursement. As you're aware, we traced his ex-wife's hidden assets overseas in the medication trade. After deducting Ben's alimony payments and awarding him $300,000 for damages, we disclosed the remaining funds to the IRS. The legal actions against the law firm and financial institution were fruitful. After legal expenses, Ben received nearly $2 million. All 3 biological fathers divorced their wives. 2 lawyers attempted to secure prenups for their wives, but these were invalidated because the husbands failed to ensure independent review by their wives' attorneys. Each father received significant settlements in their divorces. As for Ben, he departed the Cleveland Clinic and established multiple medical facilities of his own. Moreover, he found a partner, Linda Crawford, who formerly served as a nurse at the Cleveland Clinic and now works at one of Ben's clinics. Ben also joined a gym and has shed 40 pounds to date. What about his ex-wife and her children? Mr. Baker inquired. Mrs. Sharpen was convicted on various charges, including medication trafficking and tax evasion. The drugs she distributed were linked to the death of a teenager. She received sentences ranging from 20 years to life. Her children were sentenced to terms ranging from 5 to 7 years. Her 4 recent partners also received prison terms, but I didn't delve into their links as they weren't part of our project. Excellent work. I agree with closing this case too. The Janet Arnold case was particularly satisfying. Press continued without pause. I am highly pleased with the outcome. Mrs. Arnold and her children were excessively indulged by one of our associates, which was embarrassing. I recall the case, Mr. Baker acknowledged. It was extensively discussed in several executive meetings. Do you believe we can conclude it now? Yes, sir. The final judgments have been rendered. Mrs. Arnold has been allocated half of the assets we could locate. Initially, I suspected more assets were concealed, but given Mr. Arnold's financial situation, I'm confident we've recovered everything. And how is Mr. Arnold faring? Following Mrs. Arnold's settlement, we cleared Mr. Arnold's tax liabilities with interest. As you're aware, we never compensate the government for interest, considering their protracted processing times for additional tax assessments. Due to their inefficiency, we don't believe they're entitled to interest. Nevertheless, after settlement, Mr. Arnold was left with just under $200,000. Though this sum exceeds the maximum allowed for breach of contract retention, I was prepared to proceed. However, one of his partnership ventures soured, leaving him with only around $30,000. He's now engaged in selling used cars. What about the other 2 partnerships? Mr. Baker inquired. Even receiving half of his share of the income would surpass the allowable maximum. To offset his portion of the losses from the failed partnership, he had to divest his interest in the other 2. Nonetheless, we ensured Mrs. Arnold's claim was settled before he sold his shares. She's now receiving her rightful income. And here's another detail. Press grinned, producing a document. There appears to have been a paperwork mishap regarding the extradition warrant. Mr. Arnold spent 3 months in a Costa Rican prison. He entered a bit overweight and emerged considerably leaner. Allegedly, the marshals were irked because they'd never encountered a man so thrilled to return to a U.S. prison. Just out of curiosity, Press's boss inquired, what became of the woman Mr. Arnold absconded with? Ah, Tammy. Press smiled. It took her nearly 2 months to re-enter the United States. After experiencing a period of destitution in Costa Rica, she likely gained a newfound appreciation for America. Nonetheless, due to her previous conduct with her former employer, she struggled to secure employment. Eventually, she landed a role as an administrative assistant. To my knowledge, she hasn't reverted to her previous gold-digging ways. However, we'll keep tabs on her, and if she resumes any such behavior, particularly with one of our members, we'll take action. I prefer caution, Mr. Baker mused, scrutinizing the report. Perhaps we'll keep this case open a while longer to monitor Tammy's actions and see if Mr. Arnold has any additional undisclosed assets. Now onto the final case, Mr. Paul Bracken. I'm aware of its nature, but I'd like you to acquaint yourself with its outcomes. The divorce was disputed, but the court rejected it. Mr. Bracken is currently producing a new TV series titled Runaway Husbands. He struck a deal with the studio that owns the series. Since its debut, it is consistently ranked in the top 10 and has already secured a 2-year renewal. Interestingly, the role of the narrator, in my opinion, seems tailor-made for Paul's ex-wife, Beverly. I can't shake the feeling that he envisioned her for the part. And whether Mr. Southern managed to elude Beverly's influence, Mr. Baker grinned. Their relationship came to an end that day, and I believe Mr. Bracken was correct when he predicted that Beverly would fall in love and possibly face betrayal. From what I've observed, Beverly did harbor feelings for Kirk and was devastated when he left her. She didn't see him for 6 months afterward, and only occasionally went out with him. Presently, Beverly is employed as a real estate agent, and it appears she's not currently romantically involved with anyone. She seems to devote most of her non-working hours to her daughter, Sarah. Surprisingly, she's proving to be a much better mother than anticipated. Oh, and she also makes occasional appearances at the local community theater. It's not directly within your purview, but since you approached me, I thought I'd review it based on the outcomes. I'm inclined to close it down. Concluding his assessment, Press began to stand. If there's nothing else, I'll return to my tasks. Yes, I have another matter I'd like to discuss with you. Mr. Baker just yearned for Press to resume his seat. What might that be, sir? As you're aware, we recently surpassed the 2 million milestone, and our expansion is proceeding faster than anticipated. We require more representatives in the field, particularly qualified regional supervisors. I received authorization this morning, and you are being promoted to one of those supervisory roles. Congratulations! Press was taken aback, but managed to express his gratitude to Mr. Baker. You've earned it, Press. Your performance has been exceptional. You'll commence your new role on Monday. However, I must caution you that 3 or 4 of the projects your new team is handling are currently experiencing significant difficulties. I'm confident you'll be able to rectify them. Best of luck. They shook hands, and Press, wearing a grin, exited his boss's office.